when your players crit, they're going to expect a success. And if you tell them, oh, it failed, they'll be like, well, why did you ask me to roll?
Or everybody fails that roll that you asked for, and then what do you do? Yeah, you panic. You're a little...
Oh, like the Tom and Jerry. Jerry with his heart pumping out.
Yeah.
Pushes it back in, comes out this side. Oh, there goes my mic.
Hello.
Yeah, we're back. And this time, we've got a short snippet, a bit of information for players, DMs, a topic that basically is how the entire game is run. We're going to talk about when to make rolls, when to ask for checks.
We are going to teach you this incredibly valuable skill. It's almost like an art form unto itself within the game of D&D or any role-playing game that you happen to be playing that uses skill checks.
As Dungeon Masters, we get better at it every day. We're never perfect, but you learn day one and you start making mistakes and you start realizing what's really important.
Mr. Dungeon Master, what are ability checks?
Ability checks are dice rolls made by players to see if they succeed at an attempted action, my boy.
Well, can't I just describe what I want to do and then, have that happen?
Most of the time, you can. A dungeon master will only ask for an ability check if he thinks the action you're describing has a chance of failure. You see, you can't just go on describing anything you want. What's to stop you from saying, I jump over a mountain? Do you understand?
Oh, I get it. But, how do I know what I'm supposed to roll for an ability check?
Well, that, my dear player, is based on the action you're performing. An ability check is tied to one of your primary ability scores. Strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. It's up to your dungeon master to figure out which ability score to use in any given situation.
I think I understand. If I'm trying to lift something really heavy, I would need to test my strength ability?
Well, yes, now you're getting it. The dungeon master would ask you to make an ability check using strength. You would then roll a d20 and then add any modifier your strength ability would give you.
What if I'm really good at something? Does my proficiency in athletics help with my ability check?
Well, in that case, make sure you tell your dungeon master that you think you have an applicable skill proficiency. This will prompt them to make a judgment on the spot if the proficiency can apply to the role.
Wow, thanks, Mr. Dungeon Master. I can't wait to roll all kinds of ability checks and have fantastic adventures.
That's terrific, lad. Enjoy yourself before you meet a cold and unpleasant demise in this deadly fantasy world.
What?
Goodbye, my boy.
A reading from the Player's Handbook, page 174, on ability checks. The DM calls for an ability check when a character or monster attempts an action other than an attack that has a chance of failure. When the outcome is uncertain, the dice determine the results.
Per DMG, page 237. Using ability scores. When a player wants to do something, it's often appropriate to let the attempt succeed without a roll, or a reference to the character's ability scores. For example, a character doesn't normally need to make a dexterity check to walk across an empty room, or a charisma check to order a mug of ale. Only call for a roll if there is a meaningful consequence for failure.
So what do we learn from that?
I think that last sentence is probably one of our key points in this, is if there's not a serious consequence for failure, then, how important is the role that you're asking for?
The easiest way for me to remember, and I 100% agree with you, there needs to be consequences for failure. The way I think of it is we're all telling a story, right? Your players are describing their actions, and you're describing the reactions to those things. When there is a disagreement in your mind between what the players are asking to do and the environment or the things surrounding them, that's typically when my brain goes off and says, okay, there's a disagreement here, ask for a skill check of some kind. That's usually what I do.
Yeah, it's like what the players want to do bumps up against what you have in mind.
Yep.
Right? And I'm not talking about in terms of the story that you've planned for them.
No.
I'm talking more about the situation at hand.
Yep.
So, Wolf, what happens when a player asks you to do a specific skill check to achieve something?
I internally have a meltdown.
Yeah, me too.
This is a big pet peeve of mine. Players should never ask you to make a skill check. Players should never ask you to make a skill check. But what you need to do is circumvent that by turning it back around on them, and you want them to answer your question. You just be like, well, what is your character trying to do in this situation? Get them to describe their actions because they may not need to make a roll. So rather than saying, I want to make a perception roll to find a trap or something, explain that you're going around a room and you are actually looking for irregularities in the floorboards, or you're running your knife along the door's edge or something. Personally, for me, if you describe something really, really well, I'm going to give it to you. If there's a trap
you just
there,
say like it succeeds.
100%. You don't even have to make the roll. I'll be like, and I will tell the player, I'll be like, that was amazing role playing. There was something there, and you don't even have to roll for it. You found it. I think that if you make it known that you're rewarding them for good role playing and good descriptions and stuff, you'll sort of dangle that carrot, and your players will start following that.
Yeah.
I think when people look at their skills and they're stuck, a lot of times they're looking for a magic bullet or an ace up their sleeve, and they're just saying, well, how can I get out of this situation by making a skill check? And that's not how you want to play. It's a role-playing game. You want to be able to play out your character's roles, and you want to really be invested in telling this sort of natural story rather than... It's not fun to just be like, okay, let's just Arcana check here, or this there. Like, you're not actually role-playing at that point. You're just rolling dice, and the DM is just arbitrating what's happening.
You just tell me what you want to do. Because this is a game of freedom and
You can do anything.
free will. So thinking of yourself like, okay, we met a woman in the bar, and we're out hunting for her father, who's a farmer, for days. We finally go to a kobold camp, and he's dead, right? And my character is good at medicine. I want to find out how he died. I'm not going to ask the dungeon master. My first thought is, can I make a medicine check to see how he died? But what you really want to be is like, my character gets a closer look at the wounds. I want to see what kind of weapon may have been used to kill him. And then trust that your dungeon master will know what to ask you for. And if you don't get the answer that you're looking for, like, don't get upset. You may not get. He may not say medicine. He may say, make a perception check. But just go with the flow. So, Wolf, as a dungeon master, how are you setting difficulty checks, difficulty class?
Best way to do it is to put the difficulty check in increments of 5. 5 being like ridiculously easy, 10 being fairly easy, 15 being normal, 20 being hard, and so on and so forth. As you play the game more, you can get more granular with it and be like, this one's a 13.
Yeah.
Use
it as a scale.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you just want to figure out how hard it is to do something. If it's a rickety old lock that is rusted and it's barely working, you might just need a 10 to pick that lock. But if it's like this masterwork lock that's, made by gnomes and has these really hard tumblers and things in there, like it might be a 20. So you just, and again, it's something you'll get comfortable with as you run the game and the more you play. But those are the easiest things to do, is just keep that scale of 5, 10, 15, 20. Can you give me a situation, two similar situations where one you would ask your player to make a roll and one where you would not ask your player to make a roll?
There's one instance and one scenario I like to think about, and that is the glass display case. There's a single glass display case, and it has something valuable inside, right? Now, in the first instance, your player's father has a trinket, and you're trying to retrieve it from someone who stole it, right? And you go to their home, you break in, you're a rogue, you've already snuck in successfully. Now, the situation is a little more tense here, right? You come up to the glass display case, you see the trinket, and what do you do? That's a great question. It's like the Dungeon Master is going to be like, what do you do? You either are going to pick the lock, you're going to smash the glass. I'm not going to, if you did smash the glass, I'm not going to make you make a check to smash the glass, but whether you smash the glass lightly or not, so that nobody heard you, is a different
You muffle
situation.
it somehow,
Are you muffled? Yeah. What do you break the glass with? Are you trying to make a soft sound? There's
Consequences
consequences
Hell
for
yeah.
failing.
Yep.
You could smash the glass and everyone comes running before you have a chance to escape and catch you. So now the other side of that coin is you're ready to loot, right? Everything's dead.
Looting time.
And you come across a glass display case. And you say, oh, I want to smash it because I see something cool inside. And the Dungeon Master asks you to make a roll to smash the glass. That's when it's like, okay, what is this adding at this point? Like, eventually he's probably going to smash the glass with enough tries. It's just like, it's almost humorous at that point where if you fail, you like stub your finger and you're like, ugh!
Yeah.
I tried to smash the glass and I couldn't do it. Like.
Which can be funny, but those moments, they can just bring a game, grind it to a halt.
Yeah.
It's not necessary.
It takes away from what you're doing.
Well, because there's no immediate danger. You've killed everything in the dungeon, right? You have nothing but time. So if there is an abundance of time, you can just assume that your players are going to eventually succeed at the challenge, So just give it to them. As a dungeon master, really you just need to know the 6 core stats. And those are what you're going to be asking. This is how I do it. Caden might do it a little bit differently. But when I ask for a skill check, if you're smashing down a door, I ask for a strength. If you're trying to do, you're trying to like make a really crazy long jump that's like beyond what your like character can actually do based on like the written rules, that's going to be a dexterity. You're going to use those base modifiers. When the skill proficiencies come into play, for me, I typically want my players to convince me as DM that those are applicable here. So you're like, oh, well, my barbarian is, proficient in athletics. So can I get my proficiency bonus for smashing down this door? And I will say, yeah, sure, that makes sense. And that's how I try to run it. Those are specialized things that make your character a little bit cooler than everybody else sitting at the table. That's what makes you, that's your special little sauce. And you need to be convincing. I always want my players to just be like constantly trying to like work me over and be like, I'm good at this stuff. Like, give me little bonuses. Like that's what those should really be.
For me, the ability scores are the things that are tested against the character. For me, it's specifically the saves that they're making. And those ability score modify everything that they can do. They want to, and those things can be interchangeable if your player presents it in that way. So they could be like,
Yep.
you know, my character's not really charismatic, but I really want to intimidate this dude because, like, I'm big and brawny, and I feel like if I could, like, snap a sword in half in front of him, that he'd like, piss his pants and run away, right?
Yep.
So then it'd be like, well, he just explained to me what he wants to do.
Yep.
And, like, that's awesome. So, like, add your strength modifier instead of your charisma modifier to that intimidation check. So that it gets a +4 instead of a +0.
Exactly, yeah. And that's really cool because, again, it gets your players thinking creatively, gets them thinking outside of the box. And they're trying to help using, like, what they're good at,
Yeah.
you know, which I think is cool. And everyone's going to try to do that anyway, but it's just like, and that's a great example because I always hated where, like, you had this big, obviously intimidating looking character.
But I didn't add any charisma
But he's
because
just not charismatic, so he's not good at intimidating people.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't think so. I think, like you said, that's a great example. Let's be honest. Players love to roll dice. The DM loves to roll dice. Everybody likes to roll their dice. But, you know, how do you personally, how do you ask for meaningful roles to keep your players engaged?
when does something meaningful come along, right? If you feel like things are slowing down with your players, then try to shift it in a direction where they're asking questions. Get them to ask questions. Get them to tell you what they're doing. Even if you're just picking one player out, you know, Navarre, what are you doing right now? You know, what's he thinking? What does he want to do? And then your player's just going to be like, oh, I'd like to try this. And then boom, you've got a check right there. If it feels like it is meaningful, could fail, / is difficult.
So the timer is more in your head to just say, all right, I need to stop yapping, and I need to start asking them questions of what their actions are. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. It really is just engaging in what your players are thinking and what their characters want to do or what their characters are thinking.
Do you ask a specific player usually, or do you ask the whole table?
If the whole table is not responding, I pick on specific players. If I'm like, well, what do you guys want to do? If I'm like, what do you guys want to do? But the answer sometimes is like...
That happens. That's going to happen, right? That's a very real thing that's going to happen to new players, new DMs.
That's when I'm like, Bjorn.
You play with people with great names.
And then you try to, and then you try to bring the group back in. It's really reviving the rest of the group when they have something to focus on, and now they have something new to engage with, and you clear, you know, revive the party at that point.
Yeah.
Wolf, what are the consequences for rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling?
When rolling too much, the big consequence of this, that you as a DM, it's going to make you have to improvise. Because the dice tell a story. Everything is pass or fail. So if you're asking for a roll when there really shouldn't be, everything's going to come to a screeching halt because you couldn't keep your mouth shut and just say, like, no, like, this is happening or this isn't happening. So if you are the type of person where you want your players to be rolling all the time, your improv skills better be off the charts. Because that's what you're going to have to be pulling stuff out of your ace hole all the time. Especially when you get those crazy, swingy crit fails and critical successes. And I know that when you're rolling ability checks, you know, technically there aren't crits, but every single table that I've ever played at, if you roll a 20 on that damn die, the player they are expecting something spectacular to happen, and they want the dungeon master to narrate that, and it better be amazing.
If a halfling barbarian tries to wrestle a dragon to the ground...
Yeah, level 3.
I mean, you know, he has the strength, but this is a large creature. Dungeon Master could be like, you can try.
Yeah, that's
right? But if you let them try, and there is a 5% chance that they can crit, there is a 20 on that 20-sided die, and if
Yep.
it comes up, they're going to expect it to be
oh yeah, you're gonna have to narrate.
True.
You're gonna narrate Bilbo Baggins suplexing Smaug, and that's just stupid. I mean, it's amazing, but I mean, if that's the kind of game you want to run, I don't like to run those. Like, yeah, I'm all for the rule of cool and all that, but I want there to be some semblance of realism and fiction in my games. I don't want the level 3 halfling suplexing the green dragon or black dragon or whatever the hell Smaug would be. What you can do if you want to roll a little bit more and you know something is really not super consequential, like if someone's, maybe the thief is really good at climbing or something, and and it's just on the cusp of something where you're like, should this be a roll? Should it not be a roll? What I will do is I'll tell the player, yeah, you can do that. Roll a d20 and let me know if you roll a 1. So there's just a 5% chance that it's going to blow up in your face. And it gives them just that little, synapse fires and happiness.
Yeah.
And I don't know, what's it called when your brain is making you happy? What are those things called?
endorphins,
Endorphins. You get that little endorphin of rolling that little...
dopamine.
Yeah, dopamine. That's good too. You got all the words. I usually just ask for the failure because I just think that, again, that's all I'm looking for. It's just like, oh, you happen to just find the one loose flagstone or,
Yeah.
or stone in the side of this church that you were climbing. And you start losing your grip. And now we have some narrative stuff and some juicy stuff that we can really, it's like, okay, like that's my little trick if you really want to keep people like rolling a little bit more than they would normally. That's my little bonus thing. But skill checks are one of the most important tools that a dungeon master can learn and can hone. You're only going to get better at it with time. Unfortunately, there's no magic pill. The dice, when you roll the dice, they're, again, I think one of the books says they are the neutral arbiters of storytelling. So your players can't complain when something goes wrong. They can't be like, well, you tried to kill us, and they get that into that adversarial style of player versus DM, which is not good. You'd be like, no, we rolled dice, and this is what the dice said happened. So that's why skill checks are super important. They're the basis for the entire flow of the game. It's like everything that's happening in a session of D&D. Like, it is one of the most important skills that you can learn.
All the choices and all the story swings are based off of these checks.
And that's it. That's our video on skill checks. This is something that you can put in for you dungeon masters. You can put this in your little DM's toolkit. Players, if you were watching this, hopefully you got a little bit of advice on what not to do to aggravate your dungeon master. It's sort of etiquette things, but we hope that you take those to heart because they're legit. Please like and subscribe this tasty video. We work hard making them, so we hope you enjoy them.
Yeah, I'm Kamo.
I'm Wolf. Later Liches.
Later, Liches. They're expecting that you know both paths each time. And
Every single time.
You likely don't have each path every single time in your head.
No, you probably don't, especially if you're very willy-nilly with your rolls and you're just like, willy-nilly. I don't know why I said willy-nilly. It's stupid.
It's a spell.
To expose yourself? What is that?
Willy-nilly!
Make my...
It's a cone of blindness,
It sure is.